Auckland, and what a wonderful way to end the show. Happy Valentine's Day to you both, Mark, Ella. I don't know if you're doing anything,
Happy
Mark.
Valentine's Day, New Zealand.
Don't send me a handmade card. Don't send me a handmade card. Well,
Okay.
Listen, just one thing. I had a text from dear friends of mine, Keith and Catherine. She said I did exactly what Wallace did. I made Keith a homemade card last night. Not going to get caught in this commercial
Good on
rubbish.
you. All right, your local your local hero. What are they? Email me, the panel at rnz.co.nz. Checkpoint with Lisa Owen next. Stay with us right here on rnz.co.nz.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, no power, no water, no way out. New Zealand is under a state of emergency. In Napier, tens of people are on their roofs facing rising floodwater. The rescue boat turned up while we were talking to one man who'd been waiting hours for help with phone lines down. 225,000 people are without power and could be for weeks. We'll hear from the telcos and the grid operator live. There's conserve water notices too for some districts. In West Auckland, some residents are trapped in their homes, sandwiched either side by slips. We'll cross to hotspots including Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Coromandel. And don't forget, you can watch us live on the RNZ website, Facebook and Freeview Channel 50. RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Hawke's Bay and Gisborne have borne the brunt of Cyclone Gabrielle with widespread flooding and hundreds of people evacuated, some wading through chest-high water. Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay mayors are saying the destruction is worse than Cyclone Bowler in 1988, with huge damage to farmland. Thousands of people throughout the North Island are still without power and no sign of when it can be restored. In Hawke's Bay, about 45,000 people are without power after flooding took out a major substation at Redcliffe. Grid operator Transpower says it's exploring all options to restore power in the region, but still has only limited access to the substation. It's warning people to be prepared for an extended outage. Lines companies are reporting widespread outages around Taupo and Rotorua. Nationwide, the government says about 225,000 people are going without, 42,000 of them in Auckland. About 50 Tongan orchard workers who were trapped by raging floodwaters on rooftops in Hawke's Bay are now stranded on a hill in Fern Hill. Tongan RSE worker liaison for Hawke's Bay, Tevita Lata, spoke with the men before their phone batteries ran out. He says they're cold and hungry, but resilient after the impacts of the Tonga volcano disaster. The latest text from Civil Defence says the workers are being assisted by police while a rescue team attempts to get them off the hill. A helicopter may have to be used because the torrent surrounding them is so strong they may not be accessible by boat. Taradale resident Annalie Goodacre told RNZ she was forced to abandon her car after attempting to drive to Hastings. She says she and her son Lucas and dog Ruby left their Howard Road home because the Tutaikuri River was flooding and they ended up at an evacuation centre at St Joseph's Māori Girls College.
We got evacuated from Howard Road because the street turned into a river. Then we tried to get to Hastings through Puketapu and then our car got stuck between floodwaters, so a farmer drove us...
And the sediment.
And the farmer drove us back into Taradale and then we wandered here.
The evacuation order for Taradale and surrounding areas has now been lifted. Hawke's Bay Civil Defence is telling people they can return home if it's safe to do so, and their houses haven't been flooded. Civil Defence is warning Tairāwhiti residents they'll run out of water unless they limit water use to hygiene and drinking only. It's also urging people not to panic buy food, but to stay home and to look after one another. It says supermarkets and service stations are closed, but there are enough supplies for everyone if they stay sensible. All roads in and out of the Gisborne region are closed and internet and mobile data aren't working. Civil Defence says some rivers in the region reached record-breaking heights earlier today and warns that it might take days to reconnect some communities. A firefighter is still missing and another remains in hospital following a landslide in Muriwai on Auckland's west coast last night. The pair were trapped when the slip hit a house on Motutara Road. Fire and Emergency has deployed drones and is getting geotechnical advice on how to safely resume the search. About 300 people sought refuge at the Muriwai Surf Club overnight due to the unstable land conditions. North of Auckland, East Coast communities Mangawhai and Langs Beach are cut off, with access roads closed or blocked due to slips and flooding. State Highway 1 is closed either side of the communities. Residents at Langs Beach say a car park has been washed away in 10-metre waves. In the Tararua district, officials are asking residents near Akitio, Herbertville and Owahanga rivers to evacuate and move to higher ground. Mayor Tracy Collis says she's aware of 16 people in Akitio who are sheltering together after the small community was cut off. Ms Collis says an evacuation centre is open in the Dannevirke Sports Centre.
Many people had started the day. This was very fast. They have headed off to work. Some of them are trapped. They can't get home. Ngāti Kahanunu, one of our local iwi, are set up there in response along with the rapid response team.
The Tararua District Council is also asking Dannevirke residents not to use washing machines, dishwashers and flushing toilets as the wastewater treatment plant is becoming overwhelmed. And all domestic flights in and out of Auckland have been cancelled for the rest of the day, which is expected to affect about 55 trips. Air New Zealand resumed flights at midday, but then had to stop again because of the strong winds. International flights are still running as the international terminal is more sheltered. The airline plans to resume scheduled services tomorrow, but warns passengers to expect disruption and delays. In sport, the Black Caps have suffered a setback ahead of Thursday's first test against England, with pace bowler Kyle Jamieson ruled out of the series. Jamieson has suffered a recurrence of a stress fracture in his back. Fellow pace bowler Matt Henry will also miss the test, awaiting the birth of his first child. Meanwhile, the White Ferns T20 World Cup semi-final hopes hang by a thread after a second loss. Needing 133 to beat hosts South Africa, New Zealand made just 67, with captain Sophie Devine at a loss to explain why.
It's embarrassing. Can't really say much else apart from that. We've trained hard, we've put in all the work behind the scenes, and then to come out and perform like that for 2 games in a row now, it's simply not good enough.
And Crusaders coach Scott Robertson won't discuss any potential progress on the All Blacks coaching appointment. Despite speculation, he's been offered the job post the Rugby World Cup. Last week, Robertson said New Zealand Rugby was due to clarify the situation, but NZR then said no announcement was imminent. Clay Wilson reports.
Today, a post on the Mainlanders Rugby Facebook page, which has 18,000 followers, reported Robertson will formally take charge of the All Blacks from December this year. At the online launch of Super Rugby today, Robertson was asked whether he'd heard any more about the appointment process.
Look, that's a question for NZR. I'll leave it to them, thanks. Yeah.
Scott Robertson has also been linked with Fiji and coaching them at the World Cup, following the departure of coach Vern Cotter recently.
That's the news.
Cyclone Gabrielle pummels the country.
Everything that can break is broken. People can't get in touch. There is no water. The power is also off. So other than that, pretty dire.
In breaking news, the Emergency Management Minister, Kieran McAnulty, has declared a national state of emergency.
What are you thinking about today?
I'm just hoping my health is all right, and I'm just glad that I'm alive, you know.
Your source for news in an emergency. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Cyclone Gabrielle continues to bring severe weather to northern and central New Zealand today. For Northland and Auckland, remaining rain in Northland easing this afternoon. Otherwise, showers, severe southwesterly gales, gusting to 120 kilometres an hour in exposed places, easing tonight. From Waikato to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Mainly fine with isolated showers. Gale southerlies turning to a lighter southwesterly tomorrow. From Whanganui to Wellington, also from Gisborne to Wairarapa. Rain heavy for a time, easing to a few showers north of Wellington and Wairarapa tomorrow. Strong to gale southerlies, severe in exposed places from Horowhenua to Wellington and for Wairarapa. Nelson, scattered rain, clearing this evening. Fine with isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, rain north of Christchurch with heavy falls. Elsewhere, showers turning to rain tomorrow with heavy falls later. Otago and Southland, also from Bulla to Fiordland. Mainly fine, isolated afternoon and evening showers in Southland and Otago. Thunderstorms and downpours possible in Fiordland and western Southland today. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, rain, easterly gales, easing tomorrow. It's 8 minutes past 5. I'll have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi, Evie. Tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. New Zealand is in a state of emergency. People's homes are underwater. Key arterial routes in the North Island have been severed. A bridge in Napier has been completely washed away, and nearly 250,000 people are without power tonight. Some have been told it will be weeks before they can turn the lights on again. There's been phone blackouts across swathes of the North Island, making communication nigh on impossible, even for those desperate for help. We will have extensive coverage from the hardest hit parts of the country tonight, and we'll be with you until 7 o'clock this evening in this Checkpoint special. We'll cross live to Gisborne shortly, where communication's been out for most of the day. As well as that, there's significant flooding and the town water supply has been compromised. In Auckland, the search continues for a firefighter trapped in a home on the west coast while trying to help others. Whole communities have been evacuated around the upper North Island, and we speak to an Auckland couple sandwiched between two slips with no power and no way out. But we begin tonight in Hawke's Bay, Gilligan Road to be exact, in Hastings, where tens of residents have been forced to crawl onto their roofs, chased by rising floodwaters. And that's where I found Kevin McCormack when I finally got through to him. A rescue boat had just turned up and plucked his wife to safety, but he was still rooftop, several hours into it, with 2 police officers keeping him company.
We've just had to evacuate into our roof and then onto our roof. So as the water came up, we just kept going and got up onto the roof, and we had our neighbours on the roof also, so they've just been evacuated by the police, and two of the police are staying here and with me, and they'll be back and pick us up.
But at the moment, you are still on your roof?
Still there.
How long have you been there for, Kevin?
We've been trapped all day, yeah, since this morning.
So what time did you get up there?
Oh, we would have got on the roof about 10, 11 o'clock.
Goodness me.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
How high is the water right now, please?
Well, we've got a pretty high spot where we are, and the water is at the edge. So the houses, there's 4 houses here, they're completely inundated. And the orchard's underwater.
Who else is up there with you?
There was another couple. Our neighbours were with us. And everybody within that could be taken out earlier is gone. But there's still, we've got 4 people six adults next door, and they'll be getting to them as soon as they can. They're in the roof cavity of the shed.
And so right now, can you see what the rescuers are doing?
Yeah, they've just taken my wife and our neighbours down the road in the jet boat, and they'll be coming back for us. And there's 2 police officers here with us.
And has your wife had to climb down the side of the house, or how did that all work?
Yes, she went down the side of the house and then into the jet boat, yeah.
What?
So
how did they know you were there? Because I understand there's massive communications problems, right? Have you been trying to ring for help?
We have rung, and we've had other people on the outside that have been ringing, so they knew where we were. They've just been getting to us. There's helicopters working around us, so we knew that there was emergency services all around us. But I think they've got their work cut out too. There's a lot of people that they're trying to get to.
And a lot of people in a similar situation to you, Kevin, do you think?
Absolutely. I can see people on their roofs from here. There's a big RSC complex about 600 metres away from me, and there's probably 20 workers out on the roof. They just climbed out on the roof a little while ago. The water came up really quickly in the last 2 hours. It's just really come up. It's come up probably 1.5 metres, 2 metres.
And your house, is it a single-storey place or?
Single story, yeah. But we had another two-story place on the property, and they were inundated too, so they were up to the second floor.
And the speed, it sounds like it's just taken everybody by surprise.
Oh, unbelievable. Never seen anything like it.
Describe to me the water and the flow.
The flow was really quick this morning, and then it slowed down and started to drop about 1 o'clock, and then all of a sudden it just took off, and it just came up. It's just unbelievable. It came up about 1.5 metres. So it was halfway up the walls in our house.
And so, Kevin, what's happening?
Hold on a minute, please.
Sure.
Yeah, just organising to get someone else out.
And has the boat come back? What's going on now?
No, they're just taking a load out, and then we'll come back. And we've got one chap that we know that's got a health issue, so we're just going to get him next.
Do him first. And you're waiting patiently, Kevin. You're a trooper.
Well, not really. The boat's full. We're safe. We're on the roof. There's a couple of police officers there with me, so it's not a problem.
How nervous were you getting about the situation, Kevin, with the water rising?
Yeah, we weren't real happy about it. We're wet. It's raining, and we can see the helicopters working, but they look like they're working out at Clive, and I think they got their hands full. So there's an awful lot of people out there, and I know there's a lot of people they haven't got to yet. The fact that telecommunication was out for us completely, other than we could text and the odd phone call, so we didn't really know what was going on, but we knew we were certainly in bad shape because we couldn't see the water around us. And the water is never up like this in this area. Never happened before.
So as you look from the position that you're in, and you've touched on it, there's other houses nearby. As you look, how many places do you think have got people on the roofs?
I'm looking directly to the southeast, and their water is up over their eaves, and there's 6 people there, and they're sheltering. They know that the police are here now, so they're pretty happy. And another 600 metres away, I can see probably 7-8 people on a roof, and they'll be waiting to get picked up also.
What was your night like before it really turned to custard?
It was a pretty wild night. It was a really wild night. Like, it was very, very windy, incredibly windy. Lots of banging and crashing. We knew there was trees going over and stuff. We're in a rural area. So we knew there was going to be a fair bit of damage with that much rain during the night, but then it only started flooding at like 8 o'clock. There was no flooding prior to that, and then it just really went real quick. So I believe that the Tutukuri River or the Narraroa River banks failed, and it's just inundated the area.
Have you got somewhere to stay when you get off the roof?
I haven't really thought that far ahead, but I'm sure something will work out.
And that was Kevin McCormack. At the time we spoke to him, he's on the roof of his house waiting for the jet boat to return to pick him up after delivering some neighbours to safety. We'll try and check back in with Kevin and let you know that he has managed to get off there safe and well. It is 16 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Gisborne has been battered in the cyclone, and residents have been warned it could be days or weeks before power is fully restored. Roads have been cut off. There's been extensive flooding, evacuations, and the town's water supply has been hampered. Gisborne Mayor Riet Stoltz joins us now. Kia ora, Riet. Can you bring us up to date with what things are like in your part of the country?
Yes, Lisa, it is all go here in Tairāwhiti, and like you just said, we are seeing disruption like we have never seen it before. So all areas are affected. Like you said, we are cut off at this stage road-wise. So State Highway 35, there are certain areas that are open, but overall you can't travel the whole length of State Highway 35. And then State Highway 2 South is also closed. We have several faults in our pipeline, so we are asking our community, please, the water pipeline, you need to save water urgently. That is the most important message we want to get out there. We've got water for a day or two while we start our emergency plant up. And then also we have got limited electricity back in town. So some of our residents will see that they have limited power back. It is not not everyone will have it. Like myself, who live just outside of town. It will be a few days before we are back online. Lisa, we've got more than 400 people who are in our evacuation centres. So lots of people affected by the rising river levels.
A lot of detail there, Ria. Can we just talk about the water for a minute? You say you're desperate for people to conserve water. So that means what? Just only drink what you need and for hygiene, washing hands and things? We might have lost Riette Stoltz. We will try and get her back. That was Riette Stoltz, the Gisborne Mayor. Main message from her at that point, save water if you're in that district. Now, the government says there are 225,000 people without power across the country. Energy Minister Megan Woods says it's the largest disruption to electricity infrastructure since Cyclone Gabrielle, which hit in 1988. Transpower CEO Alison Andrew joins us now. Kia ora, Alison. How many people have you managed to get on to electricity?
Kia ora, Lisa. From the main transmission grid, Transpower and the main grid supplying distribution companies, we have currently power off to Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti. The rest of the country, we have full power up. Do realise there are a lot of consumers without power, but that's largely because the distribution companies that take supply off the main grid are really challenged with the destruction that Cyclone Gabrielle has wrought on their systems. So between us and the distribution companies, we are working hard to restore. For Transpower, our focus is where we have power out, which is in Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti. And the reason is we have a main supply substation supplying the Hawke's Bay region, Redcliffe, which is in Taradale, just southwest of Napier, that has been flooded. We haven't been able to get in to see the extent of the damage, but electricity and water don't mix well, so we have some challenges there with supply.
You were talking this morning about potentially putting a helicopter up, Alison. Have you managed to do that, to see what you're dealing with?
We did have one lined up for this afternoon, but unfortunately the winds were too strong and we were unable to get that up. So we have rescheduled that for tomorrow morning first thing.
And so that people understand this fully, are you saying that you've got the power in the grid, it's just pushing it out from there with the suppliers where the breakdown is?
The breakdown is the supply to the substation. The substation has been flooded, which means that that's a main off-take point, the point where we bring high voltage supply in across the Taupo-Napier highway, done from Wairaki into the Hawke's Bay region. And Redcliffe is a big substation there that then supplies Unison, which supplies distribution for the Hawke's Bay, and also supply up to the Tuaia power station to Tairāwhiti, where Eastland Energy distribute power. So we have had supply disrupted for the whole of Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti area.
Okay.
This afternoon, through the day, we have been able to work on bringing some power up from the south. We have another supply up from the south. We've managed to do some switching and some work that we can bring a small amount of supply up. So at the moment, we're starting to restore supply to Eastland and to Unison. So I think at the moment we have Unison's taking around 17 megawatts of electricity from the Fern Hill substation.
So to be clear, Alison, just on this so that people understand, you are basically switching lines. So you normally get your power feed from one particular route, which you rely on heavily. You're going to bring some more in on another line. Is there enough capacity there to get power back to everybody who needs it?
We're working on options to do that as soon as possible. We're deeply mindful of the disruption to consumers and how essential power is. So we're working closely to make sure we can get as much up as soon as we can. However, we have significant damage to the Redcliffe substation, which we haven't yet been able to get eyes on to have a look at. We have, as I say, there's two supplies, 220, the big high voltage coming in from the north. There is a lower voltage, 110,000 kilovolt supply up from the south, and we're bringing as much as we can up from the south to while we take time to ascertain what's happened at Redcliffe. But we will be working hard to do what we can to get as much power back to the region as we can, working with Unison.
Alison, sorry to interrupt, but we are almost out of time. So very quickly, how long will people have to wait?
To get full supply restored, it could take days or weeks. We don't yet know until we get eyes on the substation.
Appreciate your time, Alison. That is the CEO of Transpower, Alison Andrew there. It is 23 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can get in touch via text 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Let us know what it is like in your part of the country. How are you managing? Do you have power? Have you got the ability to phone people and check in? We will be with you until 7 o'clock tonight for this Checkpoint weather special. It is time for us to go to the headlines. Ko Ewe anō tēnei.
Transpower has restored power to thousands of homes in Hawke's Bay and Gisborne, but many households remain without. Flooding took out a major substation at Redcliffe earlier today. Transpower bypassed it to get electricity to about 17,000 households in Hawke's Bay. Meanwhile, another 10,000 houses in Tairāwhiti are back on after Eastland Network got power from Genesis to supply parts of Gisborne and Wairoa. About 50 Tongan orchard workers who were trapped by raging floodwaters on rooftops in Hawke's Bay are now stranded on a hill. The latest text from Civil Defence says the workers are accompanied by police while a rescue team attempts to get them out of Fern Hill, possibly with a helicopter. Parliament has met briefly to recognise the national state of emergency before suspending until next Tuesday. All parties, except ACT, supported the move. In other news, an 18-year-old accused of stabbing a Christchurch dog walker has been granted bail in the city's High Court. 62-year-old Nigel Wilson was found badly injured at Bexley Reserve last November and died a week later in hospital. Bailey Maservi denies murder. The real estate market has started the new year slowly, with houses taking longer to sell and fewer properties being sold. The Real Estate Institute's House Price Index put the median national residential sale price at $762,500, a drop of 13.3% from a year before. And at least one person is dead and there are multiple injured after shots were fired at Michigan State University. Police believe the gunman is still at large. Those are the headlines. To traffic now, access roads to Mangawhai and Langs Beach in Northland are either closed or blocked due to slips and flooding. State Highway 12 from Omapere to Dargaville is closed and nearby State Highway 14 is closed. In total, Northland has 6 highway closures. Waikato has 13 active closures. State Highway 16 in Auckland is closed between Helensville to Wellsford. Floods have closed State Highway 2 between Waipawa and Waipukuro and Napier to Gisborne. There are 6 total highway closures in the area. Please check Waka Kotahi's Journey Planner before you go anywhere. That's especially if you're in the North Island, our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
Kia ora rā iho. Major landslides have taken out houses in the West Auckland community of Muriwai, and the search is still continuing for a trapped firefighter. Power is out, people have been told to move out, and many don't know when they'll be back or what will become of their homes. Our reporter Tom Taylor and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
A sleep cut short in Muriwai last night. Wind, rain, then emergency alerts blaring from phones. They awoke to scenes of devastation. Domain Crescent resident Nick Armstrong's lucky to have emerged unscathed after a slip took out a house further down the hill, not far from where a volunteer firefighter was trapped inside another house.
First things first was about 10 o'clock, a house fell down the hill, just down the road. So I was the first one down there and kind of checking for people. And then came back here and thought it'd probably be safer to stay in this little cabin down the bottom of the driveway.
Luckily, no one was at home in this house. Mr. Armstrong's camper van was not so lucky. Another landslide in the night, sending it crashing down the driveway and into his girlfriend's car. While Mr. Armstrong thinks the motorhome may be a write-off, his house is largely intact. However, with slips on all sides, it's a dangerous place to remain.
Mum and Dad have come to the rescue, so I'm going to go back to their place and just grab some clothes, some dry clothes. So go back there and maybe try and ring the insurance company, see what they can do.
Not far down the road, the house Mr. Armstrong checked on is set on a 45-degree angle by the force of the landslide. Its contents, beds, tables, kitchen appliances, all piled against the walls or burst through its shattered windows. It's just one of many houses police are concerned about in the area.
Here on Muriwai's Domain Crescent, multiple massive slips have come down throughout the night. Just as we've been standing here, police have advised that they're going to evacuate the entire area and get residents out to safety.
A convoy of Auckland Council building inspectors were on the scene early this morning to gauge the safety of homes upon the cliff overlooking the beach. But with the danger of further slips too high, police decided to put a halt to assessments for the time being and established roadblocks around much of Muriwai. Meanwhile, many residents at the top of the hill had sleepless nights, wondering what the storm would bring, and spent the morning driving around, trying to check in on family and friends. Benji Ewens lives 50 metres from the cliff edge.
It's just been smashing the house. We're on pylons, the whole thing wobbles around, and we're surrounded by pahutakawas, and they're just all slowly falling apart. We moved our cars last night just to make sure they were somewhere where branches wouldn't fall on them, and now all those areas are covered in branches.
Israel Foreman and his 3 kids evacuated their Ngātira Road home last night, making their way, along with hundreds of other Muriwai residents, to the local surf club.
It was very full. There was people asleep on floors, chairs, beanbag, anything they could find. We managed to find a couple of beds for the boys. But people, 400 probably, packed all over the place.
Like much of Muriwai, the surf club was without power, and after a couple of hours, the Defence Force began evacuating people from this temporary refuge to Waimauku War Memorial Hall and Henderson's Trusts Arena.
Army turned up with their unimogs and evacuated people, everyone within kind of half hour. At that point, we thought we'd head home because we weren't forcefully needed to go anywhere.
Dylan O'Connor and his daughter Grace were among those who did Mauku Hall throughout the day. It's 5 kilometres from their home in Muriwai Valley, and with their street blocked by fallen trees and a concrete power pole, they're completing the journey on bicycles, battling against heavy winds.
Let's go back to the 80s and get on our push bikes, and what else can we do? But we're down here at the hall, and the service here is unbelievable.
Mr. O'Connor's house may be without power for 7 days, though he hopes it'll be less. Although it's a long journey, he's grateful for the simple comforts the hall's able to provide.
So we came in for a cup of tea and a bite to eat, and very thankful.
Auckland Council's emergency management team is asking property owners in the worst affected parts of Muriwai to consider their own safety and stay out of their homes for the time being.
And some incredible pictures in that story. So if you're listening on radio, we'll put the video up on our webpage. Do check it out. That story from Tom Taylor in Nick Monroe. It is 5:30. Kia amo tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news now. Ko taku hoe e nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins me live in the studio. Food inflation, Nona, it remains near record levels. What's driving up the costs?
Mostly the groceries. The overall annual increase was 10.3%, which is a little bit better than what we saw in December. But food prices rose 1.7% over the month, and most of it was grocery, food, eggs, that kind of thing. But also fruit, vegetables, that was an increase of 16%. Meat, poultry, fish, 9.2%. And non-alcoholic beverages, 7%. Ready-to-eat foods, restaurant meals, 8%. So they're all high numbers. And there's no sign in sight of those numbers easing. I don't know. Can't tell you when that might happen. But according to the industry, they're saying that the cost pressures, the input prices are what's behind that.
And the country's biggest insurer and bank are offering some support to customers who are dealing with the floods and cyclone damage. What are they offering?
Okay, well, IAG, which has got a number of brands, as well as the ANZ Bank, which is the biggest bank, they're saying please get in contact if you need any help. They're there, prepared to provide some emergency assistance if needed. For bank customers, for example, that they can provide perhaps a line of credit or some way of helping you with your debts, restructuring, that kind of thing. They're saying just, give them a call and wait on the line because there's a lot of calls coming through. But, for example, IAG is bringing people in from around the country and overseas. They're saying, for example, that the national state of emergency will probably help them with that effort because it has been a bit tricky to bring people into the country, but that hopefully will become less of a hurdle with the national state of emergency in place. So the New Zealand dollar, we were steady at 63.4 US cents, 91.1 Australian, 52.2 pence. And the NZX Top 50 index, well, it fell barely 1 point. So 1 point to 12,074.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with business news. Much of the Coromandel remains cut off tonight, with thousands still without power. For some, it will be their third night in total darkness. Our reporter, Leonard Powell, is in Tairua talking to residents who have also been without cell phone coverage.
Oh, we just had to adjust everything, just pull out my old work radio, bang a battery in it. We've got, the Makita radio, and then I got a big esky and filled up with salt ice and packed in my freezer as best we can do.
And how much damage have you seen around town, and is there any at your place or friend's place? What's the latest?
The most damage is probably down by the waterfront there. It's just carnage. Yeah, it's not good at all, eh?
Have you seen anything like it down here before?
Well, I haven't seen this for years, since Bowler. And I was in Taupo way back then, but never experienced anything like it here.
Do you feel like the town it's past now and it's clean up time kind of thing? Just
clean up time and get on with it. Hey, Chief. They breed us pretty hard up here, mate, so we just got to adapt to it, so it is what it is.
To see the amount of increase that the salt water has done and how far it's extended with the surges and a lot of the trees that have suddenly given up. Yes, it's quite extraordinary to see what's happened.
I guess it was just that howling noise. It was just this roar and a howl, and it was actually, and of course then every time you got a big wind gust, that was pretty frightening as well.
So you're blocked in at your place here?
Yes, completely blocked in. Power lines down across the driveway. The winds got really, really bad, and when we went out this morning we discovered all of this.
Tairua is such a beautiful place that this sort of, is just a shame. We just like the power back on, I guess. Once you've got your power, you can cope with most things.
And Leonard Powell joins us live now from Tairua. Kia ora, Leonard. Describe the last 24 hours for us.
Kia ora, Lisa. Yeah, since we spoke yesterday, the worst of Cyclone Gabrielle certainly moved through the area. It peaked after midnight last night. There was extremely high winds. One local was saying to me probably 150 kilometres per hour at an estimate. Locals are speaking about their roofs nearly getting blown off, many trees coming down. There's slips on all surrounding roads and surrounding hills, and the cell phone coverage was completely wiped yesterday in the area. Vodafone actually cut out yesterday afternoon, and Spark followed suit late into the night. So waking up with no cell phone coverage definitely put a lot of people into a panic. Lots were unable to contact loved ones and see if they were safe. So there's actually been plenty of check-ins around the area on behalf of other people today to see if family is safe. And thankfully down here, there's been no casualties to report in Tairua. The firefighters told me they had their hands full during the night, several call-outs across town, and the clean-up job here is definitely going to be immense. The power lines in some places were completely wiped out on Pumpkin Hill, debris from trees scattered across the town, flooding in the same areas I spoke about yesterday, close to the harbour by Manaia Road, and a 9-ton boat washed up on the edge of the harbour yesterday. Its anchor went missing, and masses of people managed to push it out today. But yeah, it was definitely scenes in town down here for sure.
And in terms of the roads, Lenny, what are the latest?
So the latest on the roads, actually, I've got a recent update. I know yesterday the roads on both sides were shut off due to flooding and slips. Today, Whitianga, people this morning were making their way over there very carefully, and I can confirm within the last hour, people have been making it through to Whangamata via Evacuee. It hasn't been officially, it hasn't been opened by Waka Kotahi, but people are kind of taking it into their own hands. And the last update from Waka Kotahi was at 7:30 this morning. So there's a lot of frustrated people on the local Facebook page trying to see what the state of play was. Murmurs are that four-wheel drives were preferable for those conditions, of course. And those who are trying to get back to Auckland, they'll be heading via Tauranga because the Karangahaki Gorge is closed at the moment. So as well as State Highway 25 between Evacuee and Thames. But yeah, there's roads are sort of, it's right on the edge of them opening, but there's no solid information about it at this stage.
A lot of people, and people mentioned it, the ones that you spoke to earlier, the power, it's a big thing for them, and if they could get it back, it would improve stuff. So any idea when it will be back on? Totally. Well, yeah, the power, unfortunately, Lisa, it's still anyone's guess. There's been no one's given me any solid time frame of when it's going to come back, but yesterday the chat was it was too dangerous to be fixing lines, and that's certainly not the case today. As I look outside, the sun is shining, which is very, very welcome, and the wind has died down. But in town, even though people were back up and running, the Four Square was back open this afternoon. They had a reserve generator, but all the chilled goods had to go to waste due to safety restrictions and regulations. So they're going to open again tomorrow from 9 o'clock, so locals will be pleased with that. And yeah, the emergency centre here is actually closing from 8 o'clock tonight till 8 tomorrow morning because they haven't had people evacuating here, and there's less staff, and they're not feeling the emergency they once were. So it's definitely a different scene here today, Lisa. The sun's out. People are, like you heard from the man in the boxies, people are ready to get on with it, and there's a real community coming together feeling down here. Thanks for the update, Leonard. That's Leonard Powell, who's joining us live from Tairua there. And some breaking news from Northland now. Around 500 more people may have to be evacuated around Dargaville in the next 90 minutes as high tide looms. The Kaipara District Mayor, Craig Jepson, says residents around Finlayson Park Avenue in the town need to evacuate now. Just to repeat that, the Kaipara District Mayor, Craig Jepson, says residents around Finlayson Park Ave in the town need to evacuate now. He says emergency services today moved 65 people in Muriwai to higher ground. There are around 80 people in evacuation centres across the district. But the looming high tide is what is posing a significant threat. New Zealand Defence Force has choppered extra police into Dargaville to assist with the evacuations. It is 20 to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at checkpointrnz or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know what it's like in your neighbourhood. And don't forget, we will be on air with you until 7 this evening for this extended Checkpoint special. It is time for us to go to the headlines now. Anea Evie, mena pita pita kōrero.
About 500 more people may have to be evacuated around Dargaville in the next 90 minutes as high tide looms in the cut-off Northland town. The Kaipara District Mayor, Craig Jepson, says residents around Finlayson Park Avenue in the town need to evacuate now. The Mayor of the Gisborne District, Riet Stoltz, says there are more than 400 people in the town's evacuation centres. She told Checkpoint they're seeing disruption like we've never seen it before. Ms Stoltz said the town was cut off and urged people to save water. A search has resumed for a firefighter who's missing after a landslide in Muriwai on Auckland's west coast last night. Another firefighter remains in hospital. The pair were trapped when the slip hit a house on Motutara Road. The Mayor of Whangarei says some residents can return home after being evacuated earlier today. Februady evacuated due to risk of a landslide threatening homes after the high rainfall. Mayor Vince Kokorulo says after inspection the landslide appears to be minor. Taranaki appears to have dodged the worst of Cyclone Gabrielle as winds ease ahead of the red warning coming off later this evening. But 3,500 homes are still without power and 5 roads in New Plymouth are closed. In other news, Michigan police say there are 5 victims and some with life-threatening injuries after a shooting at Michigan State University. Police say the suspect is still at large. And the health minister says measles vaccination rates are too low after a case reached New Zealand's shores for the first time since 2019. Aisha Verrill says everyone needs to take the virus seriously. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, State Highway 16, Helensville to Wellsford is closed. There are lane reductions on Auckland's Harbour Bridge. The cyclone fallout has closed many areas across Northland, including access roads to Mangawhai and Langs Beach. Waikato, including Coromandel, has 13 active highway closures. Please avoid travel in that region. That's what Kotahi is asking you. State Highway 2 between Waipawa and Waipukuro and Napier to Gisborne is closed. There are 6 total highway closures in the area. State Highway 35 is now open between Opotiki and Hicks Bay, but it remains closed between Gisborne and Hicks Bay. And State Highway 3 south of Eltham and Taranaki between Conway and Mata roads is closed while they remove trees. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Farmhouse Lodge in Fern Hill, west of Hastings, is home to a number of horticulture workers. Owner and filmmaker Dawson Bliss says they were forced to evacuate when the Naruroro River rose in a flash, breaching its banks in some places and inundating homes.
Yes, I've got an accommodation business in an old hotel in Fern Hill, just out of Hastings. We're on the edge of the Naruroro River, and mid-morning this morning, the river come up astronomically fast to a level that I haven't seen in the 20 years that I've been here. And I'm a bushman, and I've got my own earth-moving equipment, and the river was coming up so bad, it was going to come over the stop bank. So I got my son to get in the digger and start increasing the height of the stop bank. And if we hadn't have done that, we would have been flooded out. Now, with the police come along, and because it's a state of emergency here, they tried to stop us, and there was no way I was protecting my property. We succeeded in getting the stop bank up to the right height to keep the floodwaters out. And then when the rain stopped and we had to evacuate the lodge, all our tenants, I come up the hill, which is behind the lodge on my property, and I have a drone, and I do a lot of wildlife filming with a drone, and I decided to fly across the river to see how it was over there at Omahu, and it's nothing short of a nightmare.
Describe it to me. What could you see in the footage?
Well, the stop bank over there is the same height as the one here, but it breached the stop bank and carved out a channel probably 30 metres wide, and the full force of the river is heading straight into Omahu village. The first houses in its path are up to the roof, and then there must be 100 houses over there, and they're all completely flooded out. And then further down the river, not far, we have a bridge in front of us here, and that goes from our side over to Omahu, and couple hundred metres down the river, there's another breach in the stop bank, probably 60 metres wide, and the full force of the river is just pouring through into horticultural land, kiwi fruit orchards, maize paddocks, apple orchards. It's something that I'm 65 and it's a nightmare.
Could you estimate where it is in terms of height for us, Dawson?
Well, in Omahu, there's at least 2 metres of water through most of the village.
Do you know if everybody's got out of there?
No, I don't, but I've seen a helicopter working over there.
Okay.
And I don't know whether they were seeing what the breach was doing in the river or whether they were rescuing people, but it happened so quick, it's just mind-boggling.
The farmhouse that you have, the lodge, how many people were there and how did you get them out?
We've got 50 people there, and we were able to wade them through the water. The police came about 11 o'clock or so and said because it's a state of emergency, they want everybody out. And we got them out. We got most vehicles out. There's still a couple of vehicles stranded in flood water, and the police are still manning the area. The bridge from Fern Hill to Omahu is closed, obviously. It hasn't structurally been affected yet, but they'd be certainly concerned about it.
So when you were building up the height on the bank, that's when the police turned up and they wanted you to get out.
Yeah, they reckon it was dangerous and all that, but I've worked in the bush all my life.
Right, kia ora koutou, good afternoon everybody. As you can
Conference
see, I'm
now
joined
with
by
the Prime Minister Chris Hipkins.
Minister for Emergency Management Kieran McAnulty, Roger Ball from NEMA. Cyclone Gabrielle is the most significant weather event New Zealand has seen this century. The severity and the breadth of the damage that we are seeing has not been experienced in a generation. This morning we declared a national emergency for only the third time in our history. A short time ago, I landed back in Wellington. I've been in constant contact with NEMA throughout the day and have just received a briefing from officials. We are still building a picture of the effects of the cyclone as it continues to unfold, but what we do know is the impact is significant and it is widespread. Here is the current situation as we know it at the moment. The centre of the cyclone is just north of the East Cape. It's moving in a southeasterly direction away from the country. There is still rain and wind forecast for the Tairāwhiti Gisborne area, a few further showers for Hawke's Bay, and a large band of rain through the central part of the country. The good news is overnight tonight, in most areas we are expecting to see the weather easing. In the last 24 hours or so, Fire and Emergency New Zealand had 1,842 incidents related to Cyclone Gabrielle in their system and a further 383 other incidents. 200 Defence Force personnel have been so far deployed and there are more ready on standby. 22 Army vehicles are on the ground assisting with evacuations and emergency responses in Northland, Waikato, Auckland, Hawke's Bay and the Bay of Plenty. Vehicles and drivers are spread throughout Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taranaki at the ready to support local civil defence efforts. An NH-90 helicopter and the Navy frigate Te Mana have also been deployed to assist with search and rescue missions. Transpower has declared a grid emergency following the loss of electricity supply to the Hawke's Bay and Gisborne, with potential outages for an extended period of time. Approximately 225,000 customers have been out without power across the North Island. That's a significant increase from the 75,000 yesterday evening. This is a very significant event for the electricity network, and the companies have not seen this level of damage since Cyclone Bowler in 1988. The situation is changing rapidly, and the lines companies are expecting that there could be more customers to be affected. They're working hard to restore power as quickly as possible. They've been able to do that in some parts of Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. But restoration may be delayed in some parts until weather conditions can improve. Power outages have also had a significant impact on the fibre, copper and mobile telecommunications networks. The Telecommunications Emergency Forum has been activated and is working closely with NEMA and local civil defence operations. The first priority of the telecommunications companies remains the restoration of regional cell phone signals. High winds and ongoing poor weather is hampering progress in that area. NEMA has also been notified by Chorus of a fibre cut, which is impacting Taupo through to Napier, including Gisborne, and the teams are working hard to restore connectivity in those areas. Woolworths, who owns Countdown and Super Value stores, have reported that they have 11 stores closed across the North Island, and Foodstuffs, who own Pack and Save, New World and Foursquare chains, have 30 stores closed. The stores that have been affected are in Northland, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Kaitaia and Whangarei. One of the key messages at this point is please only buy what you need. There is enough stock in warehouses, but getting it to stores is the main issue at the moment. That is likely to get easier in the coming days, so please only buy what you need to get yourselves through. A high number of roads have been affected by surface flooding and by slips. Crews are working around the clock to fix damage across the state highway network and on local roads. Waka Kotahi is updating the online journey planner with the latest available information regularly, and this is still the best source of information for anybody who needs to travel. As of 1:45 p.m. this afternoon, international and domestic flights had started again at Auckland Airport, but widespread travel disruption and delays are expected for the next few days, and the weather is likely to still play an impact there. Community organisations have continued to mobilise swiftly to provide flood relief and to support whānau, and they'll continue to do that. Yesterday's $11.5 million community support package will help to provide immediate relief for individuals, families and households. We know that providers and community groups have been working hard to support those affected by the floods, and it's a priority to get that funding out to them as quickly as possible. The Ministry of Social Development are leading that work. I want to acknowledge the many communities, particularly in the upper and eastern parts of the North Island, that have borne the brunt of this latest cyclone and the previous one. I know that there are people in other parts of the country and overseas trying to get hold of loved ones who are now cut off without reception. Our emergency response teams are working as hard as they can to get communications back online as soon as possible. And on behalf of all New Zealanders, I want to again express our enormous gratitude to our emergency responders. They're putting in the hard yards and their lives are on the line in the service of their communities. To the families of the volunteer firefighters who responded to events at Muriwai last night, and to the wider Fire and Emergency New Zealand family, our thoughts and hopes are with all of you. To the men and women of the Defence Force, to the linemen and women, the communications companies, the supermarkets, the transport companies working to get food and goods to where they are needed, to the roading crews that are making that all possible, we say thank you to you as well. We've received reassuring support from the Australian government, indicating that they are ready to provide support where and if needed. I've also had a call from the UK Prime Minister this morning, who's also offered the UK support and assistance. So finally, before I open up for questions, here is what we are asking people across the country to do. If you are feeling unsafe, there are a number of emergency centres that are open. Go to your local Civil Defence website for more details. If you are relocating, please let your friends and family know what you are up to. Please avoid all non-essential travel. Stay at home if you can, and as long as it is safe for you to do that. If you have to travel, please drive to the conditions. Watch out for flooding and debris on the road. Stay safe and do not take any chances. And keep up to date with Met Service weather warnings and advice from your local Civil Defence and Emergency Management group. It's important to stay informed even if your power is out, so listen to the radio for the latest civil defence updates. What we've witnessed over the last few weeks has taken a huge toll on many New Zealanders. It's been turning people's lives quite literally upside down. But we've also seen Kiwis from all walks of life coming together and stepping in and lending a hand. We've seen councils, businesses, community groups, iwi, our Defence Force, our emergency service and our central government agencies all mucking in to help. And that is what Kiwis do, and that is how we will get through this. I'm now happy to open.
And that was the Prime Minister Chris Hipkins there live at an update this afternoon describing this as the most significant weather event this century. Also saying 200 Defence Force personnel deployed, more on standby, along with the Defence Force helicopter help with search and rescue too. It is 5 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, there are still huge areas of the North Island without any or very patchy cell phone reception. New Zealand Telecommunications Forum CEO Paul Brisnan joins us now. Kia ora, Paul. Can you give us a summary of the situation right now, please?
Yes, the biggest issue we're facing at the moment is getting generators to try and keep some of these key cell sites operational. Until power is restored across the North Island, we are relying on generators and the fuel for them to keep cell sites and, in some cases, landlines operational.
So how many cell sites down?
2 Degrees says they have 126 offline at the moment. Spark has about the same, 146. Vodafone's not too dissimilar. Theirs is 183. This is about 6 to 7% of the total fleet of cell phone towers across the country. So it's a significant impact on the networks.
And so what areas does that mean are out for cell phones or patchy reception?
It's right across, as you've seen throughout the last couple of days, Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Central North Island. But the biggest area of concern is the Hawke's Bay, where we've also got 2 fibre optic cable cuts, which means that they are largely cut off completely at the moment. And that's the focus for our work for the next 24 hours, I would say.
Prime Minister there saying cell phone connectivity a top priority. So as I understand it from what you're saying, the problem is power, not damage to the sites. Battery packs, they last about 8 hours or so?
About 48 hours.
48 hours,
and then
okay.
Once they're done, over to generators to try and keep things up and running.
And the generators, how many have been rolled out, and can you cover the network with generators?
Well, we can't cover the entire network. Hundreds of them have been deployed. Just this afternoon, Vodafone, Spark and 2 Degrees have bought a further 40 consumer-grade generators. These are the smaller 7 kilovolt ones. They need topping up every 7 or 8 hours with fuel. So that adds a slightly different problem to the network, which is you've now got to prioritise getting people out there with fuel. We have a number of generators in Napier, for example, that are ready to go, but we can't get fuel trucks in and out because of the state of the roads. So it is a very complex and moving situation.
Was there enough forward planning?
For what we were expecting, we put in quite an extensive amount of forward planning, yes, indeed. So those generators in Napier, for example, are part of a mobile fleet that we move around as required. I don't think anybody was prepared for quite the scale of the cyclone, and that is something we're going to have to consider as we look to future events as well.
So do the telcos accept they may have some resilience issues?
Well, I think we're certainly going to have a look at how we respond to these kinds of things. I don't think anybody was expecting to have both arms of the fibre optic network cut in a single event. That is unprecedented in terms of scale. So I think we're used to the storms of the 20th century. We now have to get ready for the storms of the 21st century.
Running short of time, but I would like to know, and people will be interested, what about the internet connections?
Yeah, they're in the same boat, I'm afraid. Everything requires power. So as long as you've got power and connectivity, you've got connectivity. It's a matter of getting mains power back to some of the core components of the network.
So is it just hurry up and wait, or can you give us a time frame?
We are looking to deploy, certainly in Gisborne, we're looking to move some satellite connectivity in to act as backhaul to replace the fibre connectivity. We're looking to do that tomorrow. We're working with NEMA and potentially with the Defence Force to fly in some gear so that we can at least provide some connectivity out of the region. That's something we'll be exploring tomorrow and hopefully putting in place within the next 24 hours.
Appreciate your time, Paul. That's Paul Brislin, who's the New Zealand Telecommunications Forum CEO there. As you would appreciate, big swathes of the country have been without cell phone coverage, been cut off in terms of communications for much of the day.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening. Ko Evacuee Ashton tēnei. About 500 more people may have to be evacuated around Dargaville in the next 80 minutes as high tide looms in the cut-off Northland town. The Kaipara District Mayor, Craig Jepson, says residents around Finlayson Park Avenue need to evacuate now. He says emergency services today moved 65 people in Muriwai to higher ground, but the looming high tide poses a significant new threat. The Defence Force has choppered extra police into Dargaville to assist with evacuations. A Hastings man has told RNZ he spent several hours on his roof with his wife and neighbours before being rescued by a jet boat. Kevin McCormack spoke to Checkpoint from the roof of his Gilligan Road house and said he could see other people on nearby homes and buildings.
I can see people on their roofs from here. There's a big RSC complex about 600 metres away from me, and there's probably 20 workers out on the roof. They just climbed out on the roof a little while ago. The water came up really quickly in the last 2 hours. It's just really come up. It's come up probably 1.5 metres, 2 metres.
Kevin McCormack says he evacuated onto his roof at about 10 or 11 this morning and was stuck there all day. Meanwhile, about 50 Tongan orchard workers who were trapped by raging floodwaters on rooftops are now stranded on a hilltop in Fern Hill. Tongan RSE worker liaison for Hawke's Bay, Tevita Lata, says they are cold and hungry but resilient after the impacts of the Tonga volcano disaster. Civil Defence says the workers are being assisted by police while a rescue team attempts to get them off the hill. A helicopter may have to be used because the torrent surrounding them may be too strong for a boat. Tens of thousands of households have their power back on in Northland and central and eastern regions of the North Island. At the peak of the outages today, about 225,000 people were without power. In Northland, Top Energy says it has 4,000 customers back on, but 10,000 others aren't. Powerco says 19,000 customers are still without power, mostly in Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Waikato and Taranaki. In Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti, enough power has been restored for 27,000 households. However, Transpower says getting it to end users depends on local lines damage. The search has resumed for the missing firefighter trapped in a house hit by a landslide in Muriwai on Auckland's west coast last night. Fire crews were responding to a flooding call on Motutaro Road when the slip happened. A second firefighter was rescued in a critical condition. Fire and Emergency says urban search and rescue crews have resumed operations after pausing since 3 o'clock this morning due to safety concerns. FENS had been earlier working with the police and the Defence Force to find a safe way to recommence the search. More than 400 Gisborne residents are in evacuation centres as Cyclone Gabrielle continues to hammer Tairāwhiti. The Mayor, Rhett Stoltz, told Checkpoint the region is seeing disruption like it's never seen before. The region's road links are cut off, with State Highway 35 impassable in places and State Highway 2 heading south also closed. Rhett Stoltz says of particular concern are faults to the water network.
You need to save water urgently. That is the most important message we want to get out there. Got water for a day or two while we start our emergency plant up.
Rhett Stoltz says hundreds of people affected by rising river levels have made their way to evacuation centres. Electricity supply also remains patchy throughout the region. The cyclone has also disrupted the sitting of Parliament. After a brief session this afternoon, it's now been adjourned until next week. Today was supposed to be the first week back in the House for MPs. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
While there were several local states of emergency in place, a national event was declared this morning. The government says resources have been flowing to where they're needed, but a national state of emergency was needed to ensure nationwide coordination of the efforts. The House is adjourned until Tuesday so MPs can return to their electorates and ministers focus solely on the response. ACT was the only party opposed, saying MPs should be present to hold the government to account when it's granted itself such extraordinary powers.
And Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown is proposing the council spend an additional $20 million a year to help mitigate and prevent storm damage. Mr Brown says he wants to revisit the capital projects list to make sure dealing with stormwater is a priority in the next financial year. The council's governing body will vote tomorrow on whether the proposed funding will go to public consultation as part of the 2023-24 budget. Auckland Council is facing an estimated operating budget gap of $295 million. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, for those in the north still dealing with Cyclone Gabrielle, keep the radio on. We'll keep you up to date with the latest information from Civil Defence in your area. The food chain asks the important questions. What's the best pasta shape? And looks at the history and cultural significance of one of the world's most popular foods. And the Sampler has new albums from Scotland trio Young Fathers, Brooklyn band She She She, and Seahorse Wedding, music for float tanks by New Zealand's Kraus. That's all coming up on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile with the RNZ app. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Cyclone Gabrielle continues to bring severe weather to northern and central New Zealand today. For Northland and Auckland, cloudy periods. Showers becoming isolated this evening. Severe southwesterly gales gusting to 120 kilometres an hour in exposed places, easing tonight. Waikato to Taumarunui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Isolated showers, fine spells increasing. Taranaki to Wellington, also for Gisborne to Wairarapa. Rain heavy for a time. Easing to a few showers north of Wellington and Wairarapa tomorrow. Strong to gale southerlies, severe in exposed places. Easing tomorrow. Nelson, scattered rain clearing this evening, fine with isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, rain north of Christchurch with heavy falls. Elsewhere, showers turning to rain tomorrow with heavy falls later. Otago and Southland, also Bulla to Fiordland, mainly fine. Isolated showers south of Wamaka today with thunderstorms and downpours possible. And for the Chatham Islands, Rekohu, rain, easterly gales, easing tomorrow. The time is 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho. Nau mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. New Zealand is in a national state of emergency. People's homes are underwater. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says Cyclone Gabrielle is the most significant weather event since Cyclone Bowler in 1988. Key arterial routes across the North Island have been severed and people are being warned to stay home and avoid non-essential travel. Hundreds of people across Napier and Gisborne have been rescued overnight and throughout the day, and as we go to air, almost 250,000 people remain without power. Some have been told it could be weeks before it's reconnected. Large parts of the country are also without cell phone coverage, making communication with loved ones almost impossible. Meanwhile, in Auckland, still reeling from what one person described to us as last month's Freaky Friday floods, the search continues for a volunteer firefighter trapped in Muriwai after a house collapsed last night. You're listening to an extended Checkpoint. We will be with you until 7 o'clock this evening. And we'll go live to the Bay of Plenty shortly, but we begin this hour where we began, in the cyclone-ravaged Hawke's Bay, where dozens of Tongan RSE workers are awaiting a possible helicopter rescue from a hill in Hawke's Bay. It comes after video emerged this morning of the Tongan RSE workers sitting precariously on roofs and some even floating on mattresses as at least 2 metres of water swamped their accommodation. Tavita Lata is the coordinator for the group of 50 fruit pickers who are employed by Mr. Apple. Earlier he told me the men who earned $22.10 an hour grabbed what belongings they could in black rubbish bags and took refuge on the roof.
The boys called me at 6 o'clock, before 6 in the morning. And they thought that it's just a minor flooding. And we keep talking, and we talk with the employer, and we contact to the civil defense. Just by 3 o'clock, there was a text from the employer saying that the civil defense and the police are very close to them, but they are all safe, and they're trying to have the rescue boat to rescue them because the current is too strong.
Tavita, describe to me the pictures of what it was like. How high did the water go and where were the men?
Yes, as the last contact with the leaders around almost 11 o'clock this morning. And I know that's where they have some live and some posting. But because it seems that their battery run out and no internet and so forth and so forth. So the only contact since 11 o'clock was the text from the employer, Mr. Apple, saying that the boys are safe and they are with the rescuers and the police. They are very close to their location to rescue them and evacuate.
I've seen pictures of the water coming up over the roof of the accommodation. Is that right?
Yes, that's what they said, that that the water is going up more than 2 meters.
And I see that some people were using their beds to stay afloat. Yes. Tell me about that.
That's what as I keep telling them, what best for them to be safe, use it because when the water comes, it's very strong and very fast. So,
were they using their mattresses, Tavita, to float on?
Yeah, I mean that's what they're trying their best, but also. They told me the civil defense advised them to the best way is to go to the roof because this is the highest place for them available.
So they were told to crawl onto the roof.
I mean, but that's the best option for them.
They must have been scared.
Yes, it must be. But I mean. You see, and the road is closed because of the unsafe to travel around, and oh man, I can't. I was trying myself to go close there, but no. But the traffic stopped us.
And Tavita, how worried is the Tongan government for them?
Very worried, very worried. I keep updating our minister in Tonga, Lord Vaya. And the RSC CEO, Dr. Fotpisi, and I just finished talking with the CEO and the minister because our Tongan government and the cabinet and the minister is really concerning about the situation of our boys.
I understand there is a lot of flooding, Tavita, in the orchards. There is lots of flooding. What will it mean if they can't work? How much do they need the income?
Oh, I think it's very obvious because normally I know when they start picking and and they know the rate is 22.10 by now. So I think that's what they really need, some money to help for their family, even in Tonga. Their family from Tonga keep calling me. Some wife and some mom, they cry, but they keep telling them, please, we have to pray. But the civil defense are trying to rescue them.
Do you know where they are right now, Tavita?
Not really, because the only text I have got from the civil defense. They are close to them at 3:00. That's the only time I got.
And that's RSC coordinator Tavita Lata speaking to me earlier. And Checkpoint has tried to reach Mr. Apple, but has yet to get a response. Meanwhile, Rebecca Ferguson is a wedding dress designer who runs her business from her lifestyle block, not far from the RSC workers in nearby Crownthorpe. A short time ago, she told me there's been no break in the weather.
It's pouring down with rain still. There's slips all around us. We can hear, we're actually really, really fortunate. We're on a hill. We've got a river that runs behind our property and we can just hear it from the inside of the house, and we look down on the flats and have seen the river sort of come up very close to the houses that we can see. But the beginning of our road, unfortunately, some of the water's gone right through the houses. Some have actually lost their homes.
Did some people have to evacuate, Rebecca?
Absolutely.
When did that happen?
Last night that all happened. Someone had to, there's a lovely couple that had just built a house and they had to be rescued off their roof by a jet boat of one of our neighbours. And as I understand, they're not sure if their animals and stuff are okay, but they're okay. But
God, that's
everything.
That is terrifying, having to send a boat in.
Yeah, just fortunately one of our neighbours had a little jet boat to go get them.
And what would have happened if there hadn't been somebody nearby who had a boat?
Oh, I wouldn't like to know. We've got a good community page, so like on Facebook, so that would have been spotted there, and the people have been sending out, because the power's been off probably since 2 last night here, and yeah, so the internet is intermittent and all that. But yeah, down our actual driveway and road, there's massive slips, can't get out, but we're all good.
But you're housebound basically, Rebecca?
Yes, yeah.
And what have you been told about power and services? Because obviously your phone is still working at the moment.
The cell phone, yes. It could be days, weeks.
And that's Rebecca Ferguson speaking to me from Hawke's Bay. It is 16 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, just an update on the power situation in Northland. More than 40,000 homes are still without power. North Power and Top Energy say their repair crews are battling winds gusting up to 140 kilometres an hour, along with flooding, slips and major damage from trees as they try to carry out repairs. The conditions are causing some new damage in areas that have been repaired. The power companies say they are acutely aware of the impact and are asking customers to plan to be without power for up to a week. That's the Northland Power Companies asking customers to plan to be without power for up to a week. Gisborne has been pummeled in the cyclone and remains largely cut off tonight, with residents being warned it could be days or weeks before their power is fully restored too. The region, which was also shaken by a magnitude 4.4 earthquake last night, has suffered extensive flooding and cell phone coverage has also been hampered. Evacuation centres have been set up across the East Cape. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham and camera operator Sam Rillstone join us now live from Auckland. Jimmy, you tried to get to Gisborne today from the north. Talk us through that journey.
I did, Lisa. I started out in Auckland and I'm back here now, so you can probably tell how the story ends, but we did try to get to Gisborne from Auckland. We travelled State Highway 35 and leaving Auckland for the first hour and a half or 2 hours of the journey towards Hawke's Bay, it was actually all right. Auckland got spared the worst of the cyclone, and the whole way we were going, the roads were a bit wet, but there weren't even really any signs that there'd been much flooding. But once we got to Hawke's Bay, that changed. The rain came teeming down. The roads, you could still see scars from the previous cyclone in January, and there were new slips there were new trees falling across the road, and we continued on a little bit, hoping to get to Ruatoria in the first instance, but that wasn't possible. There was a slip about halfway between Hawke's Bay and Ruatoria, which we just couldn't get past on State Highway 35. One lane had completely washed out. There was a little bit of space that some cars could have perhaps travelled on the other side of the road, but we weren't prepared to risk it the way the road was looking as though it was crumbling away. There was lots of water around that looked as though at any point it could have washed that road away, so we headed back here to Auckland.
Yeah, sounds like it's in pretty rough condition. So you stopped at a couple of evacuation centres along the way as well. What were people saying?
We did, and last night quite a few marae there were used as evacuation centres. There was no one there when we went to the various marae up the coast, but we did find at Hawke's Bay Lodge, we found Troy Wheeler and Tony Holden, and here's what they had to say.
We started off at Potaka, just north of here, and we've been down as far as Ruatoria this morning.
And what are you doing?
We're just opening up all the slips, just opening it up to one lane for now. It's pretty hectic out there, pretty wet and windy, so we're just doing the minimum to get one lane open. Yeah, the roads aren't holding up that well. They're just saturated and haven't had a chance to dry out.
We had about 25 here last night, and mainly just local people got evacuated, and they came up here, they got a meal, breakfast, and it all went well. And the rain eased through the night and had breakfast this morning, and they're all safely back at home.
So you're back in Auckland now, as you say. How are things there?
Portakey, the weather here is actually quite fine at the moment. It's about 20 odd degrees, it's warm. There's not really any sign that last night that cyclone just hit a Portakey. There was heavy rain last evening, strong winds, but they didn't last through the night. I woke several times during the night, as you do when you're expecting bad weather to come, and each time I woke there was no rain, there wasn't much wind. This morning when I got up around 5:30 there was light rain, so a Portakey has been spared the worst of it, and as we found out it was closer when we get round the East Cape is when you get the worst of the weather, and the rain was really lashing below Hicks Bay, and that wasn't even towards the centre of the cyclone.
Thank you for the update, Jimmy. That's Jimmy Allingham. He's with camera operator Sam Rillstone there, live from a Portakey. Hundreds of people in the coastal West Auckland community of Muriwai are yet to return to their homes after landslides brought 2 houses down, while many more are too dangerous to enter. Across the region, close to 45,000 homes and businesses are without power, and 80 roads are fully or partially closed. Amy Williams filed this report.
Cyclone Gabrielle has packed a drenching punch on the west coast, with strong winds and torrential rain landing on already sodden ground. Muriwai resident Nikita Tremaine had to evacuate her house, but the roads were covered in slips, so she waded through water to the Surf Lifesaving Club with a torch and her phone.
As I was not too far from the surf club, but, wading through knee-deep water, I'm lucky that one of the army trucks, the Unimog, were driving past, and I managed to wave one of them down with my torch in the dark, and then they managed to pull in and pick me up.
The search for a firefighter missing since a house collapsed during a routine call-out is being hampered by treacherous conditions. Fire and Emergencies Deputy National Commander Steph Rotorangi says they have crews ready to resume the search in Muriwai when it's safe.
What this looks like is deploying drones, working with New Zealand Police and Defence Force and Council on geotechnical advice for when it will be safe for our people to start searching again at this location.
Auckland Council sent 20 building inspectors and engineers to Muriwai to inspect buildings and roads, but they had to down tools. The risk too high. Police have set up an exclusion zone and are asking people not to return to dangerous properties. Along the west coast, there's no access to Piha and Karikari because of damage to Piha Road. Tahinga Bethel's beach was cut off because the river swamped the small bridge into town. But Bethel's beach resident Peter Gronderman says that has since subsided.
Well, it was wet and windy, so as being part of the local fire brigade, we had quite a few call-outs, clearing trees off the road and trees that fell on top of a house.
There are several slips along the city side of the Waitakere Ranges, some new and some from the major flooding a few weeks ago. And many communities are without internet, power and cell phone coverage. Justin Johnston is staffing the Waitakere Township Community Hall, running a generator for anyone who needs power, and offering tea, coffee and biscuits.
So I feel for a lot of people in the low-lying areas here, and a lot of the roads are pretty heavily damaged as well, so a few people up the road trapped. The road sort of collapsed.
Meanwhile, Watercare is urging residents in Muriwai, Helensville and Wellsford to reduce water use because Cyclone Gabrielle has knocked out access to water treatment plants. Earlier today, all roads leading to Helensville, northwest of Auckland, were cut off, and power and cell phone coverage has been intermittent. Resident and Rodney Local Board member Mark Dennis says the isolation creates anxiety.
People aren't able to find out how the families are doing. They can't get to them because of the flood water or the trees, and they know that the cell phone receptions are out. So that concern is horrible because they don't know what's going on and they can't go there to visit them and they can't phone them.
Mark Dennis says 6 families sheltered at the local hall overnight. At Henderson's Trust Arena, where a civil defence shelter is set up, volunteers are welcoming dogs, birds and cats with their owners for the night.
Pets are an important part of the family as well. We've had, I think, 2 or 3 dogs overnight that have been here as well. So birds that's right, we've had birds as well, cats. They're an important part of the family, so it's important that we take care of all the whānau.
It's unclear when evacuated residents will be able to return to their properties.
Amy Williams reporting there. Parts of a West Coast surf club have fallen into floodwaters and the building is now on unstable land thanks to Cyclone Gabrielle. Bethel's Beach is on Auckland's west coast, which has been hammered in the storm. At nearby Muriwai Beach, people have been evacuated from their homes and many spent the night at the surf club. Further down the coast, the road to Piha is completely cut off because the road is majorly damaged. James Lee is the Life-Saving Operations Manager for Surf Life-Saving Northern Region and joins us now. Kia ora, James. Let's start with Muriwai. What happened at the surf club last night?
Oh, kia ora. Good afternoon. Out at the surf club last night, just with the torrential rain and the wind, residents on many of the properties there, their property became unstable and were relocated to the surf club. And then there was also a lot of flooding as well. So the surf club housed upwards of 200 people overnight as sort of a safe location, and they were evacuated early this morning and mid this morning out of the surf club into the suburbs.
Have you still got people there this evening, James?
No, everyone's been evacuated from the surf club now, which was, some amazing work of our volunteers and paid staff and working alongside other emergency services like fire and police and civil defence. So everyone's been evacuated now. But it was a really full-on time for the residents of a lot of our West Coast stretch.
Tell us a little bit about that and the lifeguards' involvement. What were they doing in that evacuation?
So we had search and rescue members of the local community that are part of the surf club, and then we also had our paid lifeguards that are out there Monday to Friday as well. So with the SAR squad members and the paid lifeguards, they all got into gear, worked with fire, and just made sure that they could secure the residents and get them into a safe location for the night with shelter overhead. So they were working right through the night to the early morning, and then we managed to get everyone into safety, or as many people into safety as possible, and evacuated early this morning. And
working in some pretty hideous conditions, James?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was not easy for them. And just with the wind and rain, and it really didn't let up, and it's been, with the rain's eased back today a little bit, but we're still really seeing some strong gale force winds that will continue.
Can you tell us what the latest is with the club at Bethel's Beach?
Look, it's absolutely devastating. With the swollen estuary turned into a big river, it pushed over the banks, and at this stage, it has taken out quite a bit of the deck around the surf club, and has made the ground around the surf club really unstable and unsafe. So lifeguards, our paid lifeguards out there, but also local search and rescue members of the club, evacuated the paid lifeguards early this morning, and a lot of our equipment from the surf club, as much as we could, to the local residents' places that were on higher ground. So it's absolutely gutting for the surf club and, of course, the Surf Life-Saving Northern Region with an event of this scale that we have never seen before.
Really appreciate you joining us. That is James Lee, the Life-Saving Operations Manager for Surf Life-Saving Northern Region. Do have a look online at the pictures of the Bethel's Club there. You can see what he's talking about. Major, undercutting of the land underneath the club, and it looks like it's basically surrounded by a lake, and a really epic effort by those lifeguards overnight helping with evacuations well into the night into some pretty horrendous conditions too. It is time for the headlines now. Evie is standing by. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
The Prime Minister says they're still trying to build a picture of the devastation Cyclone Gabrielle has brought to the North Island. Chris Hipkins says the weather should ease overnight for most areas. Tens of thousands of households have their electricity back in Northland and central and eastern regions of the North Island, but many thousands face extended outages. At its peak, about 225,000 people were without power. Kiwi Rail says its Auckland commuter services are up and running again this evening. The line between Palmerston North and Wellington remains closed today, and the capital connection will be cancelled tomorrow. And US police have confirmed 3 people killed and 5 hospitalised in a shooting at Michigan State University. The suspect is still at large. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Evie. The West Auckland coastal areas of Bethells Beach, Karikari and Piha were among the hardest hit overnight. But a group of residents on Scenic Drive in Waiatarua have inadvertently found themselves in a slip sandwich. Naomi and her partner Chris live in one of 20 homes impacted. They're now completely cut off in both directions with no power and no vehicle access in or out.
The neighbours have been so good. We all met down on the road earlier today and chatted and made sure we all had each other's phone numbers. But for the moment, we're just sitting tight.
What is the situation with supplies then, Naomi? For example, if you wanted some more cereal or a loaf of bread, what are your options?
Well, we're hoping that everyone's got well-stocked cupboards, or we might be looking around for some edible bush food. But I think most people aren't this way because we're not near shops. Most people have good, well-stocked food. But yeah, we would be, if people start running out, then there's really nowhere you can go apart from try and get something out of the bush.
Can you tell me what it was like last night? Describe it to me.
Oh my gosh. It was really nerve-wracking. I'm just going to...
Oh, sorry. Hey, this is Chris here. I've just been...
Hi, Chris. Is Naomi okay?
Yeah.
She's okay.
It's an emotional time.
Yeah.
I'm all right.
Yeah.
Just a bit upset and stressed. We understand. So I was just asking her what it was like last night. Could you tell us, please, in terms of the noise and the volume of rain and things?
Well, yeah, it was, I think probably, just like what half the country had, I guess. But we're kind of tucked in slightly, so our house itself was fairly sheltered. But, just within a few metres, you could see trees virtually bending in half. So, we felt fairly safe here, but... Yeah, it's pretty full on, I've got to say, but possibly not as much rain as that first storm, but definitely much stronger wind, much stronger.
Can I just add as well now, I've just pulled myself a little bit together. I wanted to say a massive thank you. Oh my God, I can't get it out to you guys for your radio coverage.
Oh, you are most welcome. You are so welcome, and we really feel for you. We really do. And I understand you're without power too, is that right?
Yes, no power. Yeah, no power, but we've got a fireplace, we've got a gas oven, so we're feeling pretty good, feeling okay about that.
Okay, so you're able to cook warm meals at the moment?
Yes, exactly, and actually Chris was just cooking some eggs that she didn't because we're excited about your call.
Hey,
we're, compared to what we're hearing around from what other people have gone through, it's just...
Yeah, we're dry, we feel like we're safe. It's just that uncertainty of if a medical event or something happens, what is the best way to get out? I think that's what we're going to spend the rest of the day trying to establish.
And that's the question you would like answered. Has anyone been in touch with you from the emergency authorities as such?
No, but I don't know how they would get in touch, which is why we thought maybe you guys could help us. We know that the local Waiatarua volunteer fire brigade has been doing an absolutely amazing job, and they've been so quick responding to things, but these 2 slips are just way too big for anything like that.
And they're on the other side of the slip too. But actually, they had a helicopter looking at the spot that's just slipped. The emergency people had a helicopter over it last weekend to check it out. So, but obviously with this amount of rain and wind or whatever, it's still gone.
Yeah.
So at the moment, your form of communication is your phone until such time as it runs out of charge.
That's right.
Standing in this one exact spot where we seem to get reception. It just does not work anywhere else. So that's all good.
Did you hear
and we've got a great tip, which is if you have a boom box, you can actually charge your phones off that. We didn't realise that until today, so we've managed to scavenge some extra power from that.
So you were learning some really helpful things, it sounds like, and you're pretty resourceful. Did you hear the slip go, the second slip? Did you hear that?
No, we didn't. I mean, it was so noisy last night, and maybe Radio New Zealand was drowning everything else out. But no, we didn't. We didn't hear the slip go at all.
So in the last hour or so, a pretty resourceful Naomi and Chris have told us that they have been able to walk out, a bit of a precarious route, via their neighbour's property. Still no vehicle access and a slip on either side of their property with a number of households stuck in that slip sandwich. Meanwhile, residents and businesses in Kumeu in West Auckland have been flooded for a third time in 14 months. While some businesses were more prepared this time, they're once again having to pick up the pieces, having barely dried out from the last flooding just over 2 weeks ago. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
Floodwaters rapidly rising in Kumeu this morning. Cars forced to drive through the main road, which looked more like a river. Others chose to kayak to get around. The town had 10 millimetres an hour of rain earlier this morning, causing trees and debris to fall onto roads. The rivers here quickly became ferocious. Low-lying businesses had to think quickly, with many sandbagging just in time. Others were not so lucky.
Yep. Just an ongoing process, what we do on Tuesdays.
Michael Fullerton was sweeping the water out of his motorcycle repair shop for the third time since August 2021. About a metre of water came gushing through Fullerton repairs at 4 a.m. this morning. This time he had more time to prepare, well aware of how high the water could be.
So I took all my computers all upstairs there and got them all out of the water, lifted everything I could lift.
But they've barely recovered from previous flooding 2 weeks ago, with watermarks still on the walls, dirty sodden carpet and insurance claims still not accepted.
It's still not resolved, and then this happens again, so I don't have an answer really.
Kumeu River Winery is right opposite the overflowing river. Flooding came right up to the winery doors and through the vineyard this morning. Grower Michael Brakovich is thankful sandbags stopped the floodwaters reaching inside the building this time, but he says the vines are badly damaged.
Because of wet weather, when grapes are ripening, they start to split and they can rot, so there's going to be ongoing economic downturn from that particular event.
He says the frequency of flooding in this area is deeply concerning.
A really big one was back in 1979, and that did flood even higher, and that was a much more significant event. So that's the kind of time frame we expect.
Believe it or not, it's Valentine's Day, and Kumeu Flowers has had to relocate to sell their bouquets. Their shop is usually on the main road, but with this morning's flooding, it was impossible for customers to reach them, and they needed to protect their stock. They were forced to sell them out the back of their van on dry ground.
It's the busiest time of the year, and we're always open here 7 days a week, and with the flooding going on, it's just, we can't open. I mean, it goes straight into the shop and then it will ruin the flowers and then, yeah, we're not making a living.
Florist Misty Osborne says their shop has been flooded twice, but this flood falling around Valentine's Day is their biggest financial loss.
Yesterday, I'd done about half of what we'd usually do, and today we're nowhere near close.
With millions of dollars in damage for the town's flooding less than 18 months ago, it's an ongoing battle for businesses to get back on their feet.
If you were listening to that report on radio, we'll put the video filmed by Marika Habazi on our website. Now, in breaking news, we've had an update from Hawke's Bay Civil Defence. In Wairoa, the Wairoa River has burst its banks, inundating 10 to 15% of the town, which is home to around half of the population of 8,000. We will bring you more details as they come to hand. Cyclone Gabrielle has disrupted Parliament's proceedings, with its first day back in business abruptly cut short and MPs sent back to their electorates. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, reports.
Chris Hipkins was supposed to make his parliamentary debut as Prime Minister today.
Instead, from Auckland and in bright orange hivers, he addressed the nation.
It has been a very big night for New Zealanders.
Just 3 times the country has declared a national state of emergency: the Canterbury earthquakes, the COVID-19 pandemic, and now this. The move allows the emergency response to be coordinated at the highest level, ensuring assistance is sent where it is most needed.
We'll be throwing everything at this to make sure we're providing as much support to the response as possible.
The weather has consumed the Prime Minister's agenda today, top of mind during a planned phone call with his British counterpart Rishi Sunak.
The first thing that he did in that call was to express the UK's support to the people of New Zealand.
In Wellington, MPs convened to discuss the cyclone in their first meeting at Parliament this year. The politics for a moment set aside, with all parties swinging behind today's declaration.
This is an emergency that is so large and so unexpected. There's been nothing like it since 1988.
This is about New Zealand now. It's not about politics. It's actually about making sure we care about our Kiwis and our people.
They need every support and every focus of leadership.
The unity, though, could last only so long. MPs quickly butted heads in the House over the calamity's cause.
I don't think I've ever felt as sad or as angry about the lost decades that we spent bickering and arguing about whether climate change was real or not.
I think a lot of people in the farming community will say the idea if only the government made them sacrifice a few calves would be delivered from the storm. I don't think that helps right now.
The discord continued at the meeting's close, with MPs disbanded and sent home to their electorates. Parliament's business put on hold until next Tuesday. ACT, the only party to object, David Seymour says democracy is at stake.
Unless you're a Sparky with an electrician licence and can help get the power back on, probably your best job is to be here.
MPs need to be in their communities.
Te Pāti Māori went even further, protesting the need to return to Wellington at all. Debbie Naruapeka had requested Parliament meet virtually today, as it did during the pandemic. She blames National for that not occurring.
Really disappointed that we're dragged away from our communities, and virtual options should be easily done.
Our view is that we should be here in person where we can.
And with that, MPs escaped the capital. The politicking put on pause once more. Normal business to resume next week.
To the Coromandel now, and Linda Grant from Mercury Bay Business Association has been out in her gumboots today helping businesses in Whitianga with the clean-up, and she joins us now. Kia ora, Linda. How widespread is the damage?
It was pretty widespread. There's been an amazing clean-up today. People who were out helping where they could in the community with neighbours and friends, clearing a huge amount of debris and generally tidying up the town. I think if you drove through the main street today, you perhaps may think we hadn't had Cyclone Gabrielle, but if you go down to the beach, you can certainly see we have.
So what was the extent of the damage? Had it gone into shops and businesses?
Gone into quite a number of businesses along the beachfront, motels that won't be operating, I wouldn't imagine, for a wee while. So town was reasonably well protected. We had an upgrade 2 years ago, and I think they prepared with better drainage and things. So the actual central town wasn't too bad.
What about power and phones?
Power and phones have been very intermittent. We have had no power. We've had sort of power off and on for the last 2 days. We've had power that's come on just recently. So, yeah, huge power outages, and which I think actually stopped a lot of businesses from opening today.
Yeah, tell me how people are coping with that. And as a percentage, what do you reckon? Half of them closed or more?
More today, I think, as a precautionary to the warnings we've had. I think there was 2 cafes open in town today, so they probably did extremely well. But most businesses were closed in town today.
So is that power outage, is it in certain pockets, and does it take in, your main strip? You talked about the 2 cafes. They must still have power.
They did. It's very intermittent sort of power. We had people with power one place, people with the power just a few houses away, no power. So, yeah, a few people have generators in this area, but a lot of people were really affected by that power outage. And phone towers, I think, were down at some stage as well.
What about the roads? Because you've taken a real smashing on the Coromandel in terms of your roads.
We have taken a huge smashing with State Highway 25A out, and roads have been really disrupted. You couldn't leave the area today, and it's still difficult. A lot of roads affected and not easy fixes.
The thing is with the roads, we're being told there's no time frame for the fix-up with the major slips. So long term, what's the prospect for businesses?
It's really distressing. I think we've had 5 major weather events, along with a summer concert, which is our biggest event, cancelled. And State 25A is our main route in. I mean, we have 2 others. They're scenic, they're amazing, and people can take them. But, that everyday business of hospital appointments, all those things which are essential to an area, 25A was our main route.
You've, seen your fair share of flooding events. You mentioned it. How does this one compare?
This is probably the most extreme that I've seen. Look, I've personally only lived here 4 years, but, you talk to people that have been here 20, 30 years, and they have not seen anything as bad as this, maybe Cyclone Bowler. But I just think the impact with the roads this time is the most concerning factor for businesses in the area.
Really appreciate your time, Linda. The best of luck. That is Linda Grant from the Mercury Bay Business Association. As mentioned, she's been out there herself, gumboots on, helping businesses clean up today. Hawke's Bay has been pummeled by rain, forcing a number of evacuations. 90 millimetres fell in the region, turning roads into rivers and leaving residents on rooftops. Reporter Lauren Crimp is at the Hastings Sports Centre, which has been set up for evacuees. Lauren, what's happening there now?
Kia ora, Lisa. Sorry, yes, I'm here at the Hastings Sports Centre. There are hundreds of people here seeking refuge. They've got the barbecue cranking outside and feeding people dinner. But some really sad scenes. We've got families in tears comforting each other, looking for different places to go. We've also seen quite a few RSE workers in here, and some have headed off to the evacuation centre in Flaxmere, where the Samoan church is also putting people up.
What is Civil Defence telling you?
We've had a bit of a struggle with communications with Civil Defence, but I can run you through sort of what we do know so far. So, and we'll start with the central Hawke's Bay. There have been around 150 evacuees so far through areas like Waipukuro and Waipawa. Waipawa has been very badly hit. Driving through there today, farmland has just been turned into lakes. There are large numbers of evacuations in Napier and Hastings, but again, because of the struggle with communications, we don't understand as yet how many people. The Waipawa and Tukituki rivers burst its banks, so that is why things are so dire there, and we understand that stop banks will likely fail, so there is a potential for things to get worse. Now, to power, across Napier and Hastings, there are 16,000 households without power. As you will know, it could be days or weeks, we understand, until that is restored. We've had evacuations across Taradale, Meaney, Eskdale Valley has been particularly hard hit. There is extensive damage there. And very sadly, we understand in Putorero, there is a person trapped in a house after a slip has come down. Now, Civil Defence have told us they are beyond capacity to manage. They have asked for help from NEMA, and they say the full impact of the effects of the cyclone is not yet understood. They're asking people again, avoid essential travel, get to evacuation centres if you need to, and take care of friends and family.
Now, you mentioned those evacuation centres. I know that you've spent some time in central Hawke's Bay. You also went into the Waipukuro evacuation centre, and what was happening there?
Yeah, I did go there earlier today, this afternoon. Actually, the sun was shining there, Lisa, but people sought refuge after getting the knock on the door today. They were asked to leave. It was not forced, but there were many people there. Spoke to a group of people who were over from Sydney who got trapped on their road trip. Another couple who came in after a man had just had surgery yesterday. It was his first day out of surgery, and he had sought refuge. They had 66 people at the centre at the time I was there. Another 23 had been and were since able to return home, so nearly 90 people seeking refuge. Spirits were high, there were lots of supplies and all of that kind of thing, but they had no idea yet whether it was going to be an overnight stay, but that was looking likely.
Thank you, Lauren. That's our reporter, Lauren Crimp. She's at the Hastings Sports Centre there, which has been set up for evacuees. Let's go to Turkey and Syria now, where after a week since the deadly earthquakes, there are still incredible moments of success amongst the devastation. A young girl has been saved from the rubble after being trapped in ruins for 7.5 days, and a 13-year-old boy after being trapped for 182 hours. But rescues are becoming more rare as the death toll passes 35,000. The BBC's Carrie Davis reports from Adana.
The first moment in the daylight. This girl was rescued after 178 hours under the rubble, lifted overhead on a stretcher. These moments of relief are rare a week after the earthquake and hard fought for. International rescue teams are operating across the earthquake area, digging deep under precarious towers of rubble. This Chinese team rescued a man who'd been buried for 6 days. A Russian team worked for 4 hours to pull this man from the rubble. And here, Spanish rescuers from the Madrid Emergency Service, they said finding this woman alive was a miracle. The scale of the destruction is hard to comprehend. Newly dug graves marked for now with only a number. Many bodies still lie under the buildings. And for the living, they're still trying to piece together what is left.
Everything we had was here. Even my children are crying now. They're saying, "Mum, everything is gone. Our childhood is gone."
My shop, my workplace, everything was destroyed. My house was destroyed. I had one warehouse and it's gone now. I have nothing.
In Adana, nearly 200 kilometres from the epicentre, there are empty spaces amongst the tower blocks. There used to be a 16-storey building here, home to more than 90 people. At least 70 died when it collapsed. The rubble has now been removed, and the authorities say that the contractor has been arrested. But the anger here hasn't gone. Camps have appeared around the city, tarpaulin tents and makeshift fires. Some tell us that their buildings may not have been destroyed, but their faith in them has been.
You can see at night, you cannot see any open light in the buildings.
Because everyone left?
Everyone left, because everyone's scared. If just authorities say it's safe, you can sit inside, I don't sit.
The stories of survival amongst the devastation bring some small hope. But lives, homes and trust have all been taken by the destruction of the earthquake.
The war of words is intensifying between the US and China, with Beijing claiming multiple American high-altitude balloons have previously entered Chinese airspace. The claim comes a week after US forces shot down a Chinese surveillance balloon over the east coast. The ABC's Bill Birtle has more.
After a week on the back foot defending what officials called civilian research balloons accidentally flying into foreign airspace, China's government now claims it's the victim. A foreign ministry spokesman, Wang Wenbin, says since the beginning of last year, US high-altitude balloons or airships have entered Chinese airspace more than 10 times. He didn't, though, give any details of the alleged incursions, but claimed China acted responsibly by not shooting them down.
The United States clearly knows how many spy surveillance airships and balloons it's sent across the world. Who is the empire of spying and eavesdropping? It's plain to see.
China's claim comes after a week that saw the US military shoot down 4 separate aerial objects, of which only one has been attributed to China. The detection of the Chinese balloon scuttled a high-level diplomatic meeting, and relations between the two great powers have only worsened since. In a TV interview, a White House security spokesman, John Kirby, rejected Beijing's allegation of American airships over China.
Not true. Not doing it. Just absolutely not true.
Adding to the mix, a Chinese state media report of a vague safety warning issued to fishing crews due to an unidentified aerial object spotted in Chinese airspace. The warning mentioned preparations to shoot it down, fueling all sorts of claims on China's highly nationalistic social media. Dr. Ian Chong, a Singapore-based analyst with Carnegie China, says Beijing's claims of multiple US balloons may refer to disputed parts of the ocean claimed by China.
If those incursions were in disputed territory that could otherwise be construed as international airspace or international waters, then perhaps those claims are not as strong. But we don't know because the PRC side has not been more forthcoming with details.
Ian Chong says the People's Republic of China government wants to stress it's also on the receiving end of spying and surveillance. But he says the lack of transparency and a track record of dubious claims is making it a harder sell.
One of the reasons for skepticism is because over the past few years, the PRC officials have sometimes come out with more outlandish claims about COVID origin, about lots of countries agreeing with the One China principle when that may not actually be the case. So that, I think, naturally tends to encourage people to discount somewhat what PRC officials say. But it could well be true. I'm awaiting more evidence to know for sure.
Now, here's a story of a bright moment of ingenuity in today's tempest. The vet clinic in Paeroa flooded overnight, but early this morning, staff quickly grabbed the gear used to treat cattle to clear the water. The large oral drenching pumps are normally used to push 20 to 30 litres of electrolytes into the stomach of sick adult cows. But Franklin Vet's regional manager, Greg Lindsay, told our reporter Maya Burry the pumps proved extra useful.
Our clinic chap had a photo posted at 6:30 of one of the vets driving past in the whole area, farmlands across the road, the Toyota yard. Our clinic was surrounded by a ginormous lake with cars underwater and everything. And so we've had 10 or 12 vets and nurses and reception staff, the whole team in there all morning with our cattle oral pumps, cattle oral drenching pumps, draining the clinic of water and then squeegeeing the place out, and now it's dehumidifier time.
And so how do these pumps work exactly?
They go down the neck of sick cattle, so it allows us to pump 20-30 litres of electrolytes into an adult cow. And so one end goes into the bucket of water normally, and one end goes down the throat of a cattle beast, and then they pump a bucket full of water in, but equally they can be used as a as a flood device, yeah.
And Greg Lindsay says the cyclone's damage is going to put significant pressure on farming systems, with winter feed crops completely totaled. A bit of good news as we get to the end of the program. Auckland Zoo is open again tomorrow. The zoo says it only suffered minimal damage from the cyclone. Parts of the zoo will still be closed as staff are still doing assessments and clean up after the floods in January. But the animals are safe and well, and the zoo's cafe will be open from 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. We're getting a lot of feedback from you. A lot of you are unhappy with the telcos and also the power companies. This person says, I live in Kaiwaka, Northland, no phone, no internet, no one way to contact anyone. Only way I can get any info is from radio, so would appreciate any updates on when phone connectivity is back on, please. And Pene Fox from Warkworth says, we still have no power, no water and no cell phone coverage at T Point. We've driven to Snell's Beach to finally get a signal to contact family and send this message out. Others say, when are the power companies going to realise that trees and overhead power lines do not mix? Either prune the trees or put the power lines underground. Another says it's not good enough that Transpower has put a major substation in a hollow that can flood. This is third world and total incompetence. 126 cell sites offline for 2 degrees, 146 cell sites offline from Spark, and they're due to power outages. and they are working as fast as they can to fix it, but high winds are getting in the way. So that's about all we've got time for. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. Believe it or not, it's Valentine's Day, but business today has been less than rosy for florists across the North Island. First Up speaks to some of them, and they'll have the latest on the weather situation throughout the country. And RNZ, as usual, will keep you up to date on weather conditions until then. Please stay tuned, and if you're in the Upper North Island, please heed the Prime Minister's advice and avoid all non-essential travel. It is still rainy and windy out there. Be careful.
RNZ News at 7 o'clock. Good evening. Ngā mihi o te pō ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Wairoa River has burst its banks and flooded an area that is home to half the town's population. Hawke's Bay Emergency Management says the town of 8,000 has no power or telephone service, no drinking water supply, and very limited amounts of food. It says the town is now cut off by a damaged bridge to the south and impassable roads to the north. Meanwhile, it warns that in central Hawke's Bay, the Waipawa and Tukituki rivers have topped their banks and a stop bank is likely to fail. And Omahu between Hastings and Taradale has been evacuated because of flooding. The Defence Force has choppered extra police into Dargaville to assist with evacuations. About 500 more people may have to be evacuated as high tide looms in the cut-off Northland town. The Kaipara District Mayor, Craig Jepson, says residents around Finlayson Park Avenue need to evacuate. About 80 people are already in evacuation centres around the district. The Prime Minister says they're still trying to build a picture of the devastation wrought across large parts of the North Island by Cyclone Gabrielle. Chris Hipkins says the weather should ease overnight for most areas, with the centre of the cyclone moving away from New Zealand. But he says it's the most weather-significant event this country has experienced this century.
The severity and the breadth of the damage that we are seeing has not been experienced in a generation. This morning we declared a national emergency for only the third time in our history. A short time ago I landed back in Wellington. I've been in constant contact with NEMA throughout the day and have just received a briefing from officials. We are still building a picture of the effects of the cyclone as it continues to unfold.
The government estimates roughly 2,500 people have been displaced by Cyclone Gabrielle so far. This includes 1,000 in the far north, 400 in Auckland, 93 in the Bay of Plenty, 75 in Waikato and roughly 1,000 in Hawke's Bay. Emergency Management Minister Kieran McAnulty says these figures are only estimates and won't include areas that are struggling to communicate. The Mayor of Gisborne says the city is experiencing disruption like never before as the storm continues to hammer Tairāwhiti. Riech Stoltz told Checkpoint more than 400 people have fled floodwaters and are sheltering in evacuation centres. She says the region has no road access.
State Highway 35, there are certain areas that are open, but overall you can't travel the whole length of State Highway 35. And then State Highway 2 south is also closed.
Riech Stoltz says residents need to save water because a fault means Gisborne only has 2 days' supply and it will take that long to get a backup plant running. Electricity also remains patchy across the region. Transpower's chief executive says it could take days or weeks to restore full electricity supply to Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. Alison Andrew told Checkpoint the main supply was cut off when a major substation near Napier was flooded.
We have a main supply substation supplying the Hawke's Bay region, Redcliffe, which is in Taradale, just southwest of Napier, that has been flooded. We haven't been able to get in to see the extent of the damage, but electricity and water don't mix well, so we have some challenges there with supply.
Alison Andrews says Transpower has used another supply route from the north to bring some power to Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti. The Health Minister says all hospitals are operating and providing care, although one in Gisborne is on backup power. Aisha Verrill says this is part of disaster preparedness planning, and generators have fuel for 6 to 8 days. Where roads have been cut off by the cyclone, local arrangements are being made.
For example, travel is difficult between Napier and Hastings at the moment. The people on the ground there have advised people in Napier that they can go to an acute care clinic.
Dr Verrill says the health system is being constantly monitored. Police have established an online form to register the names of family or friends uncontactable in storm-affected areas for people who have access to online activity. The online form is a part of their newly established Major Operations Centre, created to provide additional support during the cyclone. Anyone with genuine concern for another's safety can fill out the person inquiry form at police.government.nz. That's police.govt.nz. Police can also fill out a form informing the police. People can also fill out a form informing the police they are safe and well. And Auckland commuter trains are back on track, resuming an hour ago after inspections. Freight trains between Auckland and Palmerston North and between Hamilton and Tauranga also resumed tonight. The Te Huia passenger service between Auckland and Hamilton restarts tomorrow morning. Kiwi Rail's Chief Operations Officer, Siva Sivipakiam, says the North Island rail network has held up well under the significant rainfall. However, as the weather moves southwards, several